We've known each other for over 10 years, and you've been in the education community, just helping so many different people at all different levels of education. And I think it's just wonderful to hear more about what you're doing to support college students.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We are thrilled to be able to be partnering with Dyslexic Advantage as well, and have appreciated all the work that you've done for many many years. So, but just a little bit about Winston, our structure. So Winston Preparatory School is was founded in 1981, with our New York campus being our first brick and mortar campus, and now as of 2022, we have 8 brick and mortar campuses,
Oh,
several in the tri-state areas, in the tri-state area, and also a brick and mortar 4th through 12th grade in Marin, California. And we also have we have a transition program, 2 campuses, one in California, San Francisco, and also in New York City. And
wow.
then we have Winston Online, which we've been had 3 wonderful years so far. We're going into our 4th year, so very excited about that and growing. Um, and then we also, under the umbrella of Winston Online, we have Winston in College, which I know we're going to talk about. Also, one more thing that we have in the works, and that we're very excited and proud about, is Winston Innovation Lab. So that's our in-house research unit of what we do as well with Winston. It's really at the heart of everything that Winston does.
Well, this is fantastic. I know that, for instance, there are a lot of students with LDs, certainly a lot of dyslexic students entering higher education, but these students are still at much higher risk for not being able to complete their degrees, and it becomes a lot of students' dreams and a gateway to better things. And so, what are the kinds of things that you guys do to help these students?
Sure. So our model is quite unique. So we begin with an ethos, really, that we believe every student is unique and an individual learner who has the potential to learn. So we start with that basic understanding. We're really focused on skill acquisition, and we use the content, so the core content. Um, Math, English, literature is what I mean by core content, to teach these academic skills. So we're focused on, again, skill acquisition, and identifying what are the core areas that a student needs to acquire, and then we use the content as a way to be able to do that. We also are very pro-social emotional learning. And so we know that these skills are very important to academic learning, but also skills are lifelong skills that a student really needs in order to have success both in their educational career, but really in lifelong success and satisfaction as well. I think we talk a lot about success, but we don't necessarily in the field talk about life satisfaction. And that's something that we look at, and our research looked at when we were trying to identify what are the core skills around SEL that a student would need for academic success, but also life satisfaction. And so through our own longitudinal study, in addition to the research in the field, we identified 8 areas, 8 domains. So just an example is organization, time management, self-reflection, huge, self-regulation, self-advocacy, communication. So just to name a few skills that we explicitly and implicitly work with a student to develop.
And so, do you like to work with college-bound students as well as those who are in the middle of college? Do you like help prepare them for college, or is it mostly an in-college program for students who look like they could get, say, additional support than what the college offers?
Yeah, so we do focus on college attainment. So we do college prep, which is part of the Winston programming for every student. We know that it's not a path for every single student. We do have some students who maybe take a gap year, they go into a vocational program, or maybe they go to a transition program like ours, perhaps another. So we know that the college track isn't something that every student wants, or maybe they want to wait and to defer that. But about 80% of our students do go on to college, and 99% of our students do graduate high school. And so when you're talking about
Wow.
80% of students with LDs, going to college, that's huge, versus the national average somewhere around 33% for students with learning disabilities. So
Wow, what a difference. And is it do you have like a system where you have where students feel like they have a person, like it's almost like a personal coach? They have, say, other, like, because there's specialized problems in college. There's foreign language, there's math, there's all these different specialty things, but also a student has someone that they can call to, like in crisis kind of thing,
yeah.
there's a lot of crisis potentially in college, but how does that actually work? Because I know you do have this kind of, when we talked before, there's kind of a comprehensive group of specialists in these different aspects of college. How does it actually work on a individual basis?
Yeah, so we really recognized. I've been in higher ed disability services for quite some time before I joined Winston online as the director, and we know that there's a huge gap between what students need and what is actually available for them, the support that's actually available for them in a higher ed situation. And so we've developed Winston in College, which is modeled after the Winston pedagogy and process. And we actually have a particular program that's called Focus program. So every student has a focus instructor, and that's one-to-one that they work with. And
Mm.
so we've modeled that, but in a college context. So now we offer virtual one-to-one learning support services for adult students with learning disabilities, such as dyslexia, executive functioning difficulties, ADHD, and also we do work with students with nonverbal learning disabilities, which is a newly defined separate LD. And so who are transitioning or currently enrolled in a college program, really anywhere in the country. So we can support students in anywhere.
And is that by I guess video calls, by text, by email? How do you actually
Work
help
with
them?
students.
Yeah.
So what we do is we start by getting to know the student, and that's something that is part of our model, is that we look at a student's assessments, their neuropsychs, any background information that they have. We obviously talk with the students, we interview them, have a conversation, get to know them, part of the application process. We pair them with a focus instructor, and so you can think of this person as kind of a learning specialist. Um, and we pair them with who we feel would be the best fit for them, depending on their areas of struggle, what they feel like that they need to develop. And then first the focus instructor and the student get to know each other and really work as a team to identify core areas that they want to work on. So depending if the student, maybe is dyslexic, um, has a hard time with, is very creative, has all of these wonderful, can think very abstract, but has a hard time with maybe the sentencing and the sequencing and construction. So we would help them in that area, but they'll also possibly executive function, and if there's social skills, learning how to self-advocate, self-reflect. So we are, and they'll meet weekly to do this, either 2 to 3 times a week. live, just like we're doing now. We meet on Google Classrooms, but and so they're using that content, they're using maybe a sociology class or uh, another class. I use that. I was a social major in undergrad, so that comes to me.
So
A
it's, yeah, well,
psychology
I would
class.
think that's a great thing, actually, just being aware of flashing back to your college experiences, because I think a lot of cases parents are reasonably worried. They have been supporting their kids from day one, and they realize from so many different kind of growth perspectives how important would be them to be successful, and how on the other hand it could be a huge blow to actually have to come back from their college situation where they're finally trying to get adjusted and then find out they're not successful. They get so far and then to have to pull back. And so I think it just seems to me, when you build up such a relationship, that could be so valuable. And at that level when the stakes are high, and yet it's kind of cold turkey if you've been sort of like, okay, isn't it time for your paper, all these kind of things where you're a little bit, a helicopter, but a helicopter because they may not succeed without the helicopter, because a lot of times if you really do have students with big gaps, they need the support. And you also realize what the social emotional consequences are of a big failure like this, that it might, you worry it might immunize them against higher education, which might be the thing that actually helps them to pursue their dreams. So that's a kind of difficulty. And it's nice to hear that you could actually meet frequently with students and help them in that way. And so, because parents, if you're on the other side of a phone call, things
Yeah.
aren't right. They aren't always very verbal about what's going on. They're not, and they don't want you to be there either. And so there's that just awkward in between. Would be nice to have somebody who understands and has a lot of tools in their toolkit who can help out where parents just can't do it anymore, because that's just not the role developmentally where they are. They want independence, but they're not quite there yet. So
Yeah, absolutely. And there's enormous learning curves that happen for so many reasons in this independent, situation. And that's something that is usually a really big surprise to parents and students, that the laws change. And so the student is really expected to be prepared socially, emotionally, and academically to take the reins and do everything on their own, without the parents. And so, and it doesn't happen just like that, right? You don't open the door on your 17 and a half and I'll walk through and you're 18 and boom, all of a sudden everything is righted and they are fully developed,
yeah, I mean,
cognitively. It just doesn't work that way.
yeah, or you don't know who the roommates are going to be. You don't know,
You don't.
especially for some students where environment is so important, and these routines that you might have gotten all the way through high school perfected, suddenly you're out the door because your living situation is totally different, or the fact that you don't have a close relationship necessarily with your teacher who might have known you for even a couple years. I mean, it's really, now you're in this anonymous classroom. It might, have several hundred kids in it. You're trying to figure out how to communicate your needs. I mean, it's an awful lot. It's an awful lot.
It is, and I think that I'm glad that you mentioned those relationships with brand new teachers. If you're taking 5 or 6 classes, you basically have 5 or 6 new bosses, and no professor is created equally. Everybody does something a little bit different, so it's very cognitively taxing. It's taxing on one's executive functions, and they're trying to kind of figure out everything all at once, just like you said, socially, their roommates. Hopefully they're working with disability services and they have accommodations, but even learning how to acquire those accommodations and how to make sure and ensure that they are implemented correctly. And working with professors, to do that is something that is a brand new situation. And up until this time in college, everything that we do as educators is really predictive, right? So we think, okay, we're seeing what happens now in a K through 12 environment, and we think that we don't know exactly what's going to happen when a student is actually in a very different learning environment. So not only are legally laws different, but also the actual learning environment is completely different. And so what the most critical skills that academic skills that a student needs, they've probably not been exposed to any of that and needed to learn those, and so everything is new. And so what the skills and the toolbox that they've had, that very good educators out there have helped them develop, don't necessarily apply in this new context. So it's all contextual, except especially for a student with ADHD, extremely contextual. And so we really look at it as the work that we do with students as transformational, um, versus transactional, right? So if I hire a tutor, which is wonderful because I need a tutor to get through this class. But again, we're really using that content, that sociology class or psychology class. So yes, we get through the class, but we're using that content, we're using those experiences as fodder to develop multiple skills, the skills that we know that we've decided this together that the
That's
student
good.
should be
That's
working
great.
on.
So you're trying to get them more independent, and it's not just, yeah, I have to say, well, even our son now is tutoring in art classes, online. And there's a lot of, I mean, the other day he said, I feel like I'm going back to college again, I mean, a little bit, because, you've got a panic student, and he's trying to tell her all the things, because a lot of times they give you assignment and they don't tell you how to do it. I mean,
That's right.
that's the funny thing about it. But so the nice thing is, because when you're initially talking about all the things that you wanted to develop in the students, the students are under time pressure. They don't want to go to, like study
Mhm.
still classes, but at the same time, they could be in crisis. So I think the nice thing you're doing is you're wrapping the skills into what they need to have to do for their college schedule now. Because I mean, I could definitely see, we often recommend things like a reduced workload because there's just too much going on. But if you really reduce your workload, sometimes you can get that and sometimes you can't. But if you get it, then it might put pressure on your financial aid. You can't go below a certain amount, otherwise they won't give it to you. And so these kids are really trying to juggle these multiple classes, and it seems, it may seem impossible. And at the same time, we know, like from that national transition study, that students who are asking for accommodations in high school, when they go to college, they don't ask.
That's right.
And why is it? Because they feel like they're an adult, they don't need it now, but that sets them up for more failure. Is it because there's not a parent over their shoulder saying, you need those accommodations, or something like that? Whatever it is, it's probably a complex combination of factors. But we
Mhm.
hear from so many college students who don't ask, and then suddenly they get hit with something they didn't realize they couldn't do. But it's a bad time if you're in the middle of that quiz, that you can't ask anymore, because you got to ask early. But that usually doesn't happen for a lot of students, and that puts them in a bind. If they get a fail early on, then it colors the entire school experience. Just
Yeah.
digging out the entire time, trying to get the mental energy to get back up again, so.
That's right. And we know that, a lot of students with LDs they really work on the self-esteem is a challenge a lot of times, because um, there's been so many feelings of defeat because of the educational system and bumping into those barriers. So we find that many, many of our students are very sensitive to that. And then to go in a whole new environment and, trying to swim and stay above water is also can be very, very deflating. And so, the other thing is when as a college student you're trying to find all of these resources, which we should be, but it's also a lot of time to go to this person and this person in this department and this department and this department, where if they had somebody who was they could go to kind of a more one-stop shop, and that is coaching them through all of their experiences, but also with the expertise that we have, um, and also an entire team. We have an entire team. We have a research department. We have a very, very skilled educators in LD, and so these are people who know this cognitive profile, learning profiles, and we're able to work with the students, but also again have that team of experience to draw from.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Do you ever get, because we hear from many adults who think about going back to school as mature students. Do you get some of these folks in your programs?
It's a great question. As of now, we have not, but we will work with students throughout their educational career. So if you have a student who is, going back, is older, which I can relate, is what I did. And that poses, new challenges as well. And just to, um, you know, for transparency, I'm dyslexic, and going back to school has a whole new and added kind of dimension. Um, and so it's been a while, and trying to figure out all the systems and build
It's so different.
strategies. It's so different. It's so different. But do work. We will work with students at any point in their college career.
That's great. Yeah, I even know, it just depends. It's like these micro environments when you get into education, and some programs definitely are, they actually seek out neurodiverse students, and they have systems that actually work very well with these students, and other ones not. And so sometimes you get stopped at unusual places. You get stopped in graduate school or something like that, and then suddenly you feel like you're alone. And it might be that you've done well, and every time it keeps narrowing the number of people that are in this very select occupation. And once you get out, you know that you're going to be successful in the career, but it's just all these different kinds of things,
Mhm.
whether it's like studying for step exams for medical school, or whether it's something like your thesis defense or whatever, and I know that from people who have made it, many times they do get stopped for a year, or more sometimes, where they kind of have to reorganize and figure out what it is I don't know how to do, but I need to know how to do to kind of get this hurdle. Because often the educational hurdles have nothing to do with the career. It's just very different when you're actually working
Mhm.
in the real world. But it's the quantity of information. It's also what a professor will ask you, or a degree granting
How?
committee. Yeah, all those kind of things, and it's like this little culture where people don't really know what's being asked of them, and you don't really have specific preparation considering who you are. And
Mhm.
or someone who can be over your shoulder and say, what, this is a way to actually do that kind of memorization, or be able to have the kind of answers you need to have in this thesis defense or whatever. And sometimes just somebody who has been through it, who's
Mhm.
knowledgeable and has seen a lot of people in higher education and how to kind of solve their problems, is kind of just the perfect thing to have. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and sometimes, when we're talking about a non-traditional student, um, well, many, many students, but just on the non-traditional student, is learning to understand your learning profile. So understanding yourself as a learner. Um, and we will help students do that as well. And so
Mm.
sometimes it's been later in life, a student's been diagnosed, and they say, oh, aha, this makes sense, but we help make more meaning out of it, more sense by as we work with them to explain and help them unpack what's going on.
Oh, that's great. And you also, I know that there are, say, even non-US based students who are also trying to make that transition. And some of them, also neurodiverse learners who are trying to do that with two languages, a
Mhm.
new culture, and the
It's a
transitions.
lot.
So you also have supports for students who may also be traveling, for instance, into a different country in higher
That's right.
education and might need some help. Okay, that's great because I
Yeah.
I, I do hear that a lot, because it's a lot to unpack. But there's certain jobs that's the best place to train, and so but you do have families who want the best, but there's just, it's often very circuitous. You see many of these students take extra years. I mean, that's costly too. But some of the ones that are just surprising are the ones who absolutely, they get into an elite school and then they leave and then they just feel like they can't go back. But
That's right. And
and
it's
that and that's
college
a
is
huge,
expensive.
yes,
It's a
yes,
huge investment.
it's
It's a
huge.
huge investment.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
so we're
yeah.
helping
Well,
hoping to bridge that gap.
yeah, no, it's so important. I mean, I can see in many cases, now it's also, it's a funny time. I mean, there are opportunities, there are pluses, and there are also downsides for different, depending on who you are. But they may de-emphasize tests, which may help some students who can, enter the door. But you know, the question is will they still have problems leaving? And for instance, even this AI chat GPT, I've been hearing from a student who, I think the teacher was kind of paranoid that chat GPT was writing all the papers and said, I'm going to make all the writing in
Yeah,
class by hand without any typing or something like that.
yeah,
But that's disastrous for dysgraphic students. You can't survive the course if that's the case. And many students are just severely dysgraphic from like, and from whether it's nonverbal learning disability or it's from dyslexia. And so these things like that, if you've got something, and I think also, as much as people love the idea of self-advocacy, it is really tough for young people. It really is tough out there. And when you're confronted by it, and even just like some of these things which should be illegal, I mean, all it takes is like a withering look or an offhand comment. I believe, I don't believe in these things legally, I may have to
yeah,
do it, may shame
right.
a student into saying, you know what, I can probably get by, let me just try taking it without it. And that is just often a big mistake. It's not what we wanted to do as a society. It's certainly not, impactful in terms of getting the most qualified people to be in important careers. And yet it happens all the time because, there is such a feeling. You go to the place that got all these like amazing architecture, these big fancy titles on the door, and then you have a kid who feels like they're by themselves and asking for a note, and I think a lot of students, they run away. They feel like, okay,
Hmm.
maybe I don't need it. I felt bad about that talking to the teacher. And
Hmm.
and it's nice having somebody say, this is not right what this teacher is doing. And
Yeah,
and
yeah.
even practice, right? You can even practice with your coach saying what you would say, put it on a piece of paper, but it doesn't happen. And I think a lot of people will suffer in silence to the, detriment of their education careers. So I think it's
That's
important.
right. And knowing their rights, knowing how to assistance in navigating those situations, because now we don't have mom and dad, right? And so, just how do you navigate those relationships and those situations, because it takes time and it happens over time, and self advocacy happens over time with practice and practice in different situations. So to have somebody there, I can kind of consider that as the person to be kind of a handrail. So to have a person that is that handrail as you're actually doing it and helping you figure out how to do it is essential. Again, not a tutor. We're helping, students with the academic piece, but we're also helping them with that social piece as well.
Yeah.
It's critical. It's absolutely it's essential, and it takes again, it's hope it happens. The development of self advocacy happens over time with practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, are there various kinds of plans? I know that coaching like this can be expensive. Are there various kinds of plans for students and families that can do that for periods of support, or how does that work? Is it just kind of like a one set plan to carry you in the school year, or are there kind of variants on that?
Yeah, right now we have packages, so but we can customize based on what the student's need is, and so students can work with their focus instructor either twice or 3 times a week. We have had people request more than that, but we start with that. We ask for a semester commitment. We do 12-week semester. You can definitely add on, but we know that there's time, the first week is just getting to know your classes, where to go. And then there's usually a break in there. And so we do a 12 week, again, certainly can add on to that. So they are customizable. But we feel like working with a student for a semester is really important versus maybe just 3 or 4 sessions,
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah,
because
I
of
can
the
see that.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
I can
type of work.
definitely see that.
And then what we
Yeah.
do at sorry
Go ahead. No.
at the end of the semester, what we do is we have kind of a wrap up session, and we talk about what went well, what the progress that was made and why, and we're very explicit, what methods were used. And then the student and focus director work together then to create next step goals. And that might be to work with us again for another semester. It might not be. So it just depends, but we help students formulate what those goals are going to be.
Yeah, I would think that would be great. For instance, if a student is already in a situation, they're on probation,
Mhm.
say. I mean, I would think that that would be a good situation, although I'm sure there are parents who would want to preempt that,
Right.
and
Yeah,
try
that's the
to
goal.
yeah, yeah. But
Yeah, the goal is,
these happen, or the ones
it
who
does.
are timidly thinking of going back. Of note, a lot of the students who ended up going to school and having to say, getting failed in a couple courses and then leaving, most of them go back somehow, and so I think it's helpful knowing a little bit that that there's a way to actually increase the likelihood of success and doesn't require all of the parent input, because as much as a parent helps, they won't know all these learning strategies that you've accumulated from working with all these different students, and sometimes your student is very different from yourself, and they're just non-intuitive the ways that they would learn, I would say, so I think there can be a lot of surprises, and especially when it's such an intense experience. It's sad to us when we hear about students who try a little school and then drop out, because we know what the human cost is. And we also know what the potential payoff is, because, it's becoming more common where you need that degree to get something else, and so, just finding some way to kind of, be able to finish that somehow is just really helpful. And besides, I think it's empowering when students meet something like a failure, and then they find a way, they know themselves better, like you say, or they have a strategy, and they don't go into this kind of global thing. So there I am, I'm stupid or whatever, so there's a logic behind it. It gives them much more control and um and strategies is going forward for other things that are undoubtedly going to happen in their lives. So yeah.
That's right. And I think confidence also, just like self-advocacy, confidence happens over time as we confront challenges. And so having, that person there, the people, because we're one part of the equation, parents are still an important part. Their role just changes. Um, but having people in the different spheres of your life that are supportive and reinforce and are there. So we're not going to eliminate all struggles, but we're going to be a support as a student is going through whatever struggle that is, an appropriate support.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Is there anything you'd like to add, just in terms of advice for parents or students?
I think really thinking about what a student needs. It could be that a student, it would be part of a plan to start with maybe 3 or 4 classes at community college, and then we can support a student then, and then make plans to go into and give them a little bit more time. Some students that works very well, to have that kind of safety net and working and then go into a 4-year institution. Some students might want to jump right into that 4-year situation environment, and as you mentioned, going to highly competitive school. I definitely want to think about what supports are in place and start early. Start thinking about it early. Start talking to disability services for accommodations. As soon as you're accepted. Don't wait. And I tell students all the time, even if you think you're not going to need them, because a lot of, as you mentioned, some students don't seek out, a lot of students don't seek out those accommodations. They feel like, I've done this now. I've had the special ed, I've had all of that. I'm in college and I got this. I don't need it.
Yeah.
And then then they are
But you don't
derailed.
know what
So
it's gonna be like. I mean,
you
you
don't
can't
know what
really
it's
prepare for it, and suddenly you're sitting in the sitting at the desk, and you're like, "Whoa," I have
yeah.
no idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you can always not use something. You can always not
Yeah, yeah,
use
yeah,
something.
yeah, exactly right, yeah. No, no,
So
that's a perfect advice. Yes, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just
No,
something for students to think about.
yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really great. Well, thanks so much. Been wonderful talking
Thank
to you.
you.
If anyone has any questions, can we ask afterwards? They might send it by email or something like that. Would be great.
Absolutely. They can email me at tmancini at winstonprep.edu. And I know we'll have that information along with the video, but definitely please, 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 please email me if you have any questions.
Oh, fantastic. All right,
Yeah.
great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.